When I refused to liquidate my life savings for my daughter's lavish wedding, she didn't just uninvite me. She sent me the bill and launched a public campaign to shame me into paying it. She thought she was exposing a cruel mother. She thought her performance of victimhood would force my hand. She has no idea I'm about to give her exactly what she wants. I'm going to pay for her party in full in front of her new wealthy in-laws. And in doing so, I'm going to show them all that the price of her wedding was her entire future. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Dr. Althea Grant. For 40 years, my world was shaped by the hallowed halls of Howard University, where I was a professor of African American history. My life has been one of substance, of inquiry, of understanding that the foundations of our present are built from the carefully preserved artifacts of our past. I am a woman who believes in legacy. My home, a historic brownstone in Washington, D.C.'s LaDroit Park neighborhood, is not merely a house. It is an archive of a life well lived, its shelves lined not with trinkets, but with books, each one a conversation with a mind from another time. I am now 65, recently retired, and my life is one of quiet, ordered peace. A peace I have earned. Like any good archivist, I have spent a lifetime curating what is important. My most significant collection, however, was not housed at the university. It was held in a series of investment accounts managed with a discipline bordering on obsession. It was called the Morgan Grant Foundation account, and it was the tangible manifestation of my love for my only child, my daughter Morgan. From the day she was born, a portion of my salary, every raise, every stipend from a guest lecture, every royalty check from a published paper, was funneled into this account. It was not a simple savings fund. It was a philosophical statement. I had watched too many of my friends and colleagues mortgage their futures to fund their children's fleeting desires. I vowed to do something different. The foundation account was never intended for a flashy car or a European backpacking trip. It was for a cornerstone. It was for a down payment on a first home, seed money for a business venture, a cushion to allow her to pursue a graduate degree without the crushing weight of debt. It was a legacy of security, a foundation upon which she could build a life of substance, not just style. The account had grown over 3 decades into a formidable sum, a testament to the quiet, powerful magic of compound interest and a mother's unwavering focus. It was my final and most important dissertation on the meaning of legacy. I believed my daughter, a bright, ambitious young woman, understood this. I believed she had listened to my lessons. I was wrong. My life's work was about to be re-evaluated, not as a foundation for her future, but as an obstacle to her immediate gratification. And the quiet, ordered peace of my retirement was about to be shattered by the one person I thought I was building it for. Morgan announced her engagement on a crisp autumn afternoon in my study. She breezed in, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and restless energy, her fiancé, Julian Hayes too, trailing in her wake like a handsome, well-appointed dinghy pulled by a speedboat. Julian was from a family that was a pillar of black society in Potomac, Maryland, the kind of old money family whose wealth was a quiet, humming engine of political connections and lobbying power. They were perfectly pleasant, impeccably dressed, and possessed a serene, unshakable confidence that comes from generations of never having to check a price tag. I was, of course, happy for her. I hugged her, I congratulated Julian, I poured champagne. But as Morgan began to speak, a cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of my stomach. She wasn't talking about her love for Julian, or their shared dreams for the future. She was talking about an event. She unrolled a set of glossy brochures and architectural drawings onto my antique desk, right on top of a first edition of Carter G. Woodson. "So, we've secured the date at the Congressional Country Club," she began, her voice a breathless torrent of brand names and society page buzzwords. "The theme is Gilded Age Glamour. We've got the top floral designer in the DMV, a 10-piece band, and a caterer who has done 3 inaugural balls." She spoke for 20 minutes, outlining a production of staggering expense and complexity. This was not a wedding. It was a coronation. It was her grand, formal entrance into the Hayes family's social stratosphere, an event designed not to celebrate a union, but to announce her arrival. I listened, my heart sinking with every mention of a 5-figure deposit and a non-refundable booking fee. Finally, she finished her presentation. She looked at me, her eyes shining with a feverish, expectant light. She slid a leather-bound folder across my desk. "This is the final budget," she said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "It's all-inclusive. The planner, the venue, the dress, the pre-wedding events. Everything." I opened the folder. The final number at the bottom of the spreadsheet made me feel lightheaded. It was a sum that could have funded a full doctoral scholarship, endowed a research grant, or purchased a lovely starter home in a decent neighborhood. It was, I noted with a sickening lurch, almost the exact total value of the Morgan Grant Foundation account. "Morgan," I said, my voice quiet, "this is a great deal of money." "It is," she said, her chin held high. "It's an investment. In our future. In our social standing. The Hayes don't do small, Althea. This is the standard. It's what's expected." The use of my first name was a deliberate distancing tactic. I was no longer her mother. I was a financial institution she was addressing. "And you expect me to pay for this?" I asked. "Of course," she said, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "That's what the foundation account is for. It's my money, isn't it? You've been telling me about it my whole life." The dread in my stomach solidified into a cold, hard stone. She had fundamentally misunderstood everything. She saw the account not as a foundation for her life, but as a slush fund for her lifestyle. She saw my life's work, my discipline, my love, as a simple line of credit she was now ready to cash in for a party. The conversation I had been dreading for years was finally upon me. I took a slow, deliberate breath, a technique I had often used before delivering a challenging lecture. I would not meet her frantic, entitled energy with anger. I would meet it with the calm, reasoned clarity that had been the hallmark of my entire professional life. "Morgan," I began, my voice even, "let's talk about the foundation account. You are correct, I have been building it for you your entire life. And yes, in the simplest terms, it is your money. But it was always intended as a foundational gift. A cornerstone for your adult life. Not for a party. Not even for a party this grand." I closed the folder with the budget and pushed it gently back across the desk towards her. "I will not be liquidating the entire account to pay for this event. It would be a violation of the very principle on which it was built." Morgan's face, which had been alight with triumphant expectation, began to cloud over. A storm was gathering. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. "I am saying no to this budget," I replied calmly. "But I am not saying no to helping you. I am prepared to offer you two options." I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the desk. "Option 1, I will give you as a wedding gift, a very generous but fixed sum of money." I named a figure that was, by any normal standard, extravagant. It was enough to fund a beautiful, elegant, and memorable wedding. "You can use that sum however you see fit. If you can create this production for that amount, then you are a more brilliant manager than I thought. That is my gift to you with love." I paused, letting that offer sink in. "Option 2, I continued, is that you and Julian pay for whatever wedding you feel is appropriate for your circumstances. And then after the wedding, when you are ready to buy your first home, I will turn over the entire Morgan Grant Foundation account to you, as was always the intention. You can use it as a down payment, you can use it to furnish the house, you can use it to ensure your marriage begins on a foundation of financial security, not debt." I looked her directly in the eye, trying to convey the lifetime of love and wisdom behind my words. "The choice is yours, Morgan. A spectacular party for one day, or a secure foundation for the rest of your life. I am offering you a wedding gift or a life gift. I cannot, in good conscience, allow the two to be the same thing." I had laid out my position with what I felt was unimpeachable logic and genuine generosity. I had offered her a fortune, just not on the terms she demanded. I was appealing to the smart, sensible woman I believed her to be. But I was not talking to that woman. I was talking to a stranger, a person so blinded by social ambition that she could no longer distinguish between value and price. The storm I had seen gathering in her eyes was about to break. Morgan stared at me, her face a mask of disbelief. The silence in the study was thick and heavy, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. For a moment, I thought my words had registered, that the logic of my position was penetrating the glittering facade of her ambition. I was mistaken. Her disbelief curdled in an instant into a pure, unadulterated rage. No, she whispered, the word a puff of air. Then louder. No. You have got to be kidding me. She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. A fixed sum? A life gift? Do you hear how condescending you sound? She began to pace in front of my desk, her movements sharp and agitated like a caged animal. This isn't about a spectacle, Mother. This is about my life. This is about my future. The Hayes family, they are not like us. They are not your university colleagues who are impressed by a signed first edition. They are a dynasty. Their world operates on a different level. This wedding is not a party. It's a merger. It's my introduction to that world. And you want me to show up looking like I couldn't afford the cover charge. Morgan, that is a gross mischaracterization, I said, my own voice rising slightly despite my resolve. The amount I offered is more than enough. Enough for you, she shot back, whirling to face me, her eyes blazing. It's enough for your world in your quiet little house with your dusty old books. It is not enough for the world I am about to enter. Don't you see? You're not just refusing to pay for a wedding. You are actively trying to sabotage me. You are trying to embarrass me in front of the only people whose opinion has ever mattered to me. The cruelty of that last phrase, the only people whose opinion has ever mattered to me, was a physical blow. 40 years of parenting, of love, of sacrifice, erased in a single venomous sentence. That is a deeply unfair and untrue thing to say, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Is it? She sneered. You're the one who is being selfish. You're sitting on a pile of money that you named after me, money you've always told me was mine, and now when I finally need it, you're holding it hostage to your own petty academic principles. You would rather feel morally superior than see your own daughter happy. The argument devolved from there. It was no longer a discussion. It was an indictment. I was controlling. I was out of touch. I was jealous of the life she was about to lead. Every word was designed to wound, to manipulate, to break my resolve. When she saw that I would not break, her tactics shifted from anger to a cold, final ultimatum. She stopped pacing and stood before me, her face set like stone. This is the last time I am going to ask you, she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. Are you going to pay for the wedding as we planned from my account? I have given you my answer, Morgan, I said, my heart aching. I will not. Fine, she said, her voice a flat, dead thing. She picked up her expensive handbag from the floor. Fine. Then we have nothing more to talk about. She walked to the door of the study. She didn't look back. Consider yourself uninvited. To the wedding. To my life. I will not have someone so toxic and unsupportive around me. Julian and I will figure it out. And when we do, don't you ever expect to hear from me again. And then she was gone. I sat in the sudden, profound silence of my study, the echo of her words hanging in the air like poison gas. I was still sitting there an hour later when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from a social media app. Morgan Grant Hayes has blocked you. A few minutes later, another. My number was blocked. She had done it. She had surgically, efficiently, and completely excised me from her life. The price of my principles was my own daughter. In the weeks that followed, I existed in a state of suspended grief. The silence from Morgan was absolute. I was a ghost to her. Through the periphery of social media, through the shared acquaintances who would awkwardly mention it, I saw the wedding preparations continue, a grand, unstoppable machine rolling towards its destination. I saw photos of her bridal shower, of her bachelorette party in Miami. In each photo she was radiant, smiling, surrounded by a coterie of fawning friends, with no hint of the mother-shaped hole she had blasted into her own life. The wedding itself was, by all accounts, the spectacle she had planned. It was featured in a local society magazine, the photos showcasing the gilded glamour she had so desperately craved. There she was, in her couture gown, on the arm of her new husband, surrounded by the powerful and the privileged. She had gotten what she wanted. I told myself that perhaps this was the end of it. That she would now, in her triumph, simply forget me, and I would be left to nurse my wounds in private. I had once again underestimated her capacity for cruelty. The public shaming began a month after the wedding. It started with a phone call from my dear friend and former colleague, Dr. Weatherby. Althea, he said, his voice hesitant and deeply uncomfortable. I saw something online. I'm sure it's just some misunderstanding, but it's about you. He directed me to a popular fundraising website. And there was. My breath caught in my throat. The page was titled in large, bold letters, "Help us cover the wedding our mother abandoned." The page was a masterpiece of manipulative performance. It featured a professionally shot photograph of Morgan and Julian, looking soulful and sad. Beneath it was a long, carefully crafted narrative written by Morgan that painted a devastatingly false picture. "It is with the heaviest of hearts that we are forced to turn to our community for help," it began. "As many of you know, we recently had the wedding of our dreams. What you may not know is that this beautiful day has been overshadowed by a deep personal pain. My mother, Dr. Althea Grant, a woman to whom I have dedicated my life in love and respect, made a promise to me years ago that she would help me start my new life by funding my wedding from a trust she had established in my name. But days before the ceremony, in an act of inexplicable cruelty, she reneged on that promise, leaving us with a mountain of debt and a broken heart." The text went on, weaving a story of a daughter's devotion and a mother's cold, inexplicable betrayal. It was filled with half-truths and outright lies, all designed to make me look like a monster. And then came the masterstroke. "We are not asking for charity," she wrote. "We are simply asking for help in covering the binding contracts we were left with. To be fully transparent, we have uploaded the outstanding invoices from our vendors below, so you can see exactly where your generous contributions are going." And there they were. Scanned copies of the bills. The 5-figure invoice from the caterer. The bill from the floral designer with its line items for Siberian orchids and hand-flown peonies. The final, staggering bill from the Congressional Country Club. It was a public airing of our private dispute, a shaming ritual designed for maximum impact. She had turned my refusal to fund her extravagance into a public spectacle of my own alleged cruelty and her victimhood. The campaign was a sickening success. It went viral within the small, interconnected world of academic and political Washington, D.C. People I had known for decades, who had eaten at my dinner table and debated history in my study, were now seeing me portrayed as a heartless, promise-breaking villain. I received emails not of support but of confused, pitying concern. "Althea, is everything all right?" I saw Morgan's post. "I'm so sorry you're going through this." They believed her. Of course they did. Her story was so dramatic, so detailed, so brazen, it had the ring of a terrible truth. She was not just trying to raise money. She was trying to destroy my reputation. She was using my good name, the name I had spent a lifetime building through integrity and hard work, as the very platform for my own humiliation. The pain of it was a physical thing. It was a constant dull ache in my chest, a sickness in the pit of my stomach. She had not just cut me off. She had set out to systematically dismantle my legacy, my character, and my peace. She had declared a war I had never wanted to fight. But now I had no choice but to find a general. My general came in the form of Charlotte Pierce, a woman who had been my best friend since we were nervous freshmen together on the campus of Howard University 45 years ago. Lottie, as I called her, had gone on to law school and had become one of the most formidable estate planning attorneys in the city. Where I was analytical and reserved, Lottie was a force of nature. A brilliant, profane, and fiercely loyal woman with zero patience for fools, a category into which my daughter had just spectacularly vaulted herself. I called her the day after I discovered the fundraising page. I could barely get the words out, my voice choked with a mixture of shame and a grief so profound it felt like I was drowning. I read her excerpts from Morgan's narrative, my voice breaking over the calculated cruelty of the words. Lottie listened in a silence that was far more terrifying than any shouting could have been. When I finished, the only sound on the line was her slow, deep breathing. "That little, ungrateful, conniving serpent," she finally hissed, each word a perfectly polished stone of contempt. "Althea, I am getting in my car. I will be at your house in 20 minutes. Do not talk to anyone. Do not reply to a single email. Do not even look at that cursed webpage again. Touch nothing. We are now at a crime scene and you are not to disturb the evidence." When she arrived at my brownstone, she swept in like a hurricane of righteous fury. She hugged me fiercely, then immediately sat me down in my own study, took my laptop and began to read. Her face as she scrolled through the page was a mask of cold, controlled rage. "The invoices," she muttered, her eyes narrowed to slits. She posted the actual invoices. The sheer, unmitigated gall. This isn't just a family dispute. This is a public relations campaign. This is a character assassination. And it is actionable as hell. I was still in a state of shock, of wounded disbelief. What do I do, Lottie? Should I post a reply? Tell my side of the story? Lottie slammed the laptop shut. Absolutely not, she commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of a 5-star general. You will not engage with this nonsense online. You will not get into a public mudslinging contest with your own child. That is her battlefield. She is an expert in that kind of warfare. You are a scholar. We will not fight her in the mud. We will fight her in a boardroom. We will fight her with the law. And we will do it in the quietest, most dignified, and most utterly devastating way possible. For the next hour, Lottie paced my study, her brilliant legal mind working at a furious pace. She deconstructed Morgan's campaign, not as a daughter's betrayal, but as a legal problem to be solved. She has made a fatal error, Lottie said, a grim, triumphant smile beginning to form on her lips. She thinks this is about emotion. About public sympathy. She has no idea that what she has actually done is create a public, itemized, legally binding bill of goods. She has, in effect, sent you an invoice. And that gives us an opening. An opening to do what? Asked my voice weak. An opening to pay it, Lottie said, her eyes gleaming. I stared at her, confused. Pay it? Lottie, the whole point is that I refuse to pay it. No, Lottie corrected, pointing a finger at me. The whole point was that you refused to fund a spectacle from a legacy account. That was a private family matter. She has now made it a public financial transaction. And we are going to treat it as such. We are going to accept her terms. But we are going to do it in a way that will make her regret the day she ever heard the word GoFundMe. She then laid out the plan, the beautiful, ruthless, and intellectually elegant strategy that would become my salvation. It was the generous buyout. First, she said, ticking the points off on her fingers, we do nothing. We let her campaign run its course. We let her think she has won. We let her bask in the sympathy and the donations. We want her at the peak of her arrogance. Second, she continued, when the time is right, we will issue a formal public statement through my law office. It will be the epitome of grace and class. It will say that you are heartbroken, that you wish to end the public conflict, and that in the interest of her happiness, you have decided to pay the full amount of the wedding bill she has so publicly detailed. Third, and this is the most important part, Lottie said, leaning in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, we arrange a meeting to deliver the check. A formal closing. And we insist that her new husband and his powerful, image-conscious parents be present, for the sake of family reconciliation. We are going to turn her own public stage into our private courtroom. And then what? I asked, a flicker of my old fighting spirit beginning to ignite. Lottie's smile was a terrifyingly beautiful thing to behold. And then, my dear Althea, she said, we are going to give your daughter exactly what she wants. And we are going to make it cost her everything she has. I looked at my friend, at the fierce, protective loyalty in her eyes, at the brilliant, strategic mind already at work, and I felt the fog of my grief begin to lift. I was not alone. I had my own general, and the war was about to turn in my favor. For 2 weeks, I followed Lottie's instructions to the letter. It was one of the most difficult periods of my life. I lived like a recluse in my own home, the drawn curtains a shield against a world I felt was judging me. The GoFundMe page was a roaring success. Morgan, with her telegenic tears and her carefully crafted narrative of maternal abandonment, was a compelling victim. Donations poured in, accompanied by messages of syrupy sympathy for her and pious condemnation for me. She posted updates thanking her amazing community for their support, each post another small public twisting of the knife. Through it all, I remained silent. I did not answer the concerned emails. I did not take the awkward phone calls. I let the narrative she was spinning solidify, let the public perception of me as a cruel, withholding mother harden into accepted fact. Lottie was right. The higher she flew on the wings of public sympathy, the more devastating her fall would be. Then one Monday morning, Lottie decided the time was right to spring the trap. She drafted the statement. It was a work of art. A document so full of grace, dignity, and subtle, loving reproach that it was impossible to read it as anything other than the words of a heartbroken but ultimately benevolent matriarch. The statement, released on the official letterhead of Lottie's prestigious law firm, was sent to the same gossip columnist who had so gleefully reported on Morgan's campaign, as well as to a few key figures in the university community whom we knew would disseminate it. Read. On behalf of my client, Dr. Althea Grant, I am issuing this statement to address the recent public fundraising campaign initiated by her daughter, Morgan Grant Hayes. Dr. Grant is, and has always been, a deeply private person, and she is profoundly saddened that a private family disagreement has been made the subject of public speculation. Dr. Grant's love for her daughter is and has always been unconditional. Her single greatest wish is to see her daughter happy, secure, and successful in her new marriage. The dispute was never about money, but about a difference in philosophy regarding financial stewardship and the nature of a legacy. However, seeing the distress this conflict has caused her daughter, and with a sincere desire to end the public nature of this painful episode, Dr. Grant has chosen to rise above the disagreement. She has decided to honor the full amount of the wedding expenses as publicly detailed by her daughter. It is her hope that this gift will allow the young couple to begin their married life free from the burden of debt and that, in time, a private healing of their family can begin. Arrangements will be made for a private transfer of funds. Dr. Grant will be making no further public comment on this matter. The effect was instantaneous and exactly as Lottie had predicted. The public narrative, which had been so firmly on Morgan's side, flipped on a dime. The gossip columnist published a follow-up piece, this time praising my unimaginable grace under fire. The comments on the articles shifted from, "How could a mother be so cruel?" to "Wow, her mother is a class act." Morgan and Julian, of course, saw it as a total, unconditional surrender. They posted a triumphant update on their fundraising page. "We are thrilled to announce that my mother has had a change of heart and has agreed to do the right thing. Thank you to everyone in our amazing community whose support made this possible. Your voices were heard." They were gloating. They believed their public shaming campaign had worked perfectly. They believed they had bullied me into submission, that I had crumbled under the weight of public opinion. They were so blinded by their victory that they could not see the beautifully constructed, perfectly camouflaged trap that was waiting for them just ahead. They had taken the bait. And now Lottie was ready to set the hook. The call was made the following day. Lottie did not call Morgan. She called Julian, a deliberate, strategic choice. Lottie knew that Julian, for all his family's prestige, was the weaker link, more susceptible to the formal, authoritative language of the law, and more likely to be focused on the simple acquisition of the money. "Mr. Hayes," Lottie began, her voice the epitome of crisp, professional courtesy. "Charlotte Pierce calling from Pierce, Covington and Dunn. I'm calling on behalf of my client, Dr. Althea Grant, to arrange for the transfer of funds as outlined in our public statement." Julian's voice, Lottie later recounted to me, was smug with victory. "Of course, Ms. Pierce. We've been expecting your call. Just let us know where to send the wire transfer details." "I'm afraid it's not quite that simple, Mr. Hayes," Lottie replied smoothly. "Given the public and rather painful nature of this affair, Dr. Grant feels strongly that the resolution should be handled with a degree of formality and personal reconciliation. She believes this is an opportunity to heal the unfortunate rift in the family." "What do you mean?" Julian asked, a note of caution entering his voice. "My client has instructed me to arrange a brief, formal meeting here at our law offices," Lottie explained. "At this meeting she will present you and your wife with a cashier's check for the full and final amount. She feels it's important to do this in person as a gesture of goodwill. Furthermore, as this is an act of family reconciliation, she has made one small request." "What request?" "She insists that your parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, be present as well," Lottie said, her voice as sweet as honey. "She feels it is vital that her new extended family be there to witness this closing of a painful chapter and the beginning of a new, more positive one. A show of family unity, if you will." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Lottie could almost hear the gears turning in Julian's head. He was weighing the inconvenience against the prize. The presence of his parents was an unexpected complication, but the goal was the money. And the idea of his mother-in-law formally capitulating, handing over a massive check in front of his powerful parents, must have been an incredibly appealing prospect. It would be the ultimate validation of their campaign, the final scene in their drama of victimhood and triumph. I suppose that can be arranged," Julian finally said. "My parents are very busy, but I'm sure they will want to be there to support us and to welcome Althea back into the family." "Wonderful," Lottie said. "We are available on Friday at 2 p.m. Our boardroom has been reserved. We look forward to seeing you all then." She hung up the phone, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "The fish are in the net," she told me when she called me moments later. "They're swimming right into the boat and they think they're heading to a party." In the days leading up to the meeting, I felt a strange and profound calm. The grief and shame that had been my constant companions were gone, replaced by a cold, clear, and absolute resolve. I was no longer a victim. I was an agent of consequence. I prepared for the meeting not with anger, but with the meticulous care of a scholar preparing for a dissertation defense. I reviewed the documents with Lottie. I went to the bank and had the cashier's check drawn up, the crisp, official piece of paper feeling like a weapon in my hands. On Friday morning I chose my outfit with care. I did not wear black, the color of mourning. I wore a tailored suit of deep burgundy, a color of quiet power and authority. I wore my hair pulled back in a neat chignon. I wore the simple, elegant pearls that my late husband had given me. I looked in the mirror and saw not a heartbroken mother, but a university professor, a woman of substance and dignity, on her way to deliver the most important lecture of her life. They were expecting a surrender. They were about to get a masterclass in the art of the buyout. Lottie's boardroom was a symphony in mahogany and quiet intimidation. It was a room designed to make people feel small, a place where fortunes were dismantled and futures were decided with the stroke of a pen. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Washington Monument, a silent, stoic witness to the proceedings. They arrived precisely at 2 p.m. The whole family. Julian Hayes Sr. and his wife Eleanor were the picture of Potomac power. He in a perfectly tailored suit that bespoke his lobbying prowess, she in a Chanel suit and a helmet of perfectly coiffed hair, her expression one of bored, aristocratic condescension. Julian too and Morgan followed them in, their faces alight with a kind of smug, triumphant glee. They looked at me not with warmth, but with the satisfied air of victors inspecting the spoils of war. They thought this was their victory lap. Lottie and I were already seated at the head of the long, polished table. We rose politely as they entered. Lottie, ever the consummate professional, was gracious and welcoming, directing them to their seats. I simply nodded, a cool, neutral expression on my face. "Thank you all for coming," Lottie began once they were seated. "As you know, we are here today to finalize the generous gift Dr. Grant is making to her daughter and son-in-law, and to hopefully begin a process of family healing." Eleanor Hayes gave a tight, patronizing smile. "We are so pleased Althea has come to her senses," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This whole public affair has been most unseemly." "Indeed," Lottie agreed smoothly. "Which is why we are so eager to conclude it." With that, I reached into my leather portfolio and produced the first document. It was the cashier's check. I slid it across the polished surface of the table. It came to a stop directly in front of Morgan. The amount was written in clear, stark numbers. The exact to the penny total of the invoices she had so proudly displayed on her GoFundMe page. Morgan's eyes widened. A greedy, triumphant light shone in them. She reached out her hand, her perfectly manicured fingers about to close around the check that represented her absolute victory. "Just one moment," Lottie said, her voice suddenly as sharp and cold as ice. As Morgan's hand hovered over the check, Lottie slid a second, much thicker portfolio across the table, placing it directly beside the check. On its handsome leather-bound cover, embossed in gold leaf, were the words, "The Morgan Grant Foundation Account, Final Statement and Distribution." A flicker of confusion crossed Morgan's face. She looked from the check to the portfolio. Julian and his parents leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. "Before you accept that check, Morgan," Lottie said, her voice now devoid of all warmth, "my client felt it was important for all parties to have full transparency. That portfolio contains the complete and final statement of the foundation account that was the subject of your public appeal." With a sense of theatrical timing, Lottie opened the portfolio to the summary page, a single sheet detailing the account's history, its investment performance and its final total value. She turned it so that everyone at the table could see. The number was staggering. It was more than 3 times the amount of the wedding check. It was a life-changing sum of money. I watched as the reality of it landed on them. I saw Julian Sr., eyebrows shoot up. I saw Eleanor's mask of bored superiority crack, replaced by a look of naked, avaricious calculation. I saw Julian Tooth's jaw go slack. And I saw my daughter's face. I saw the triumphant glee drain away, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. She was finally beginning to see the shape of the trap she had so eagerly walked into. As you can see, Lottie continued, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, the foundation account was quite substantial. It was, as Dr. Grant always intended, a true cornerstone for a life. However, given the recent turn of events, we have had to formalize its distribution. She then produced the final document. It was a single sheet of paper. She placed it on top of the portfolio. This, she announced, is a legal document titled, Final Inheritance Distribution and Severance of All Future Claims. It is quite simple. It states that the cashier's check on the table represents a full and final distribution from the foundation account, and by extension from Dr. Althea Grant's entire estate. By accepting that check, Morgan, you are legally and irrevocably waiving any and all future claims to your mother's assets, now and upon her death. You are, in effect, choosing your inheritance, the party or the portfolio. The room was utterly silent. The trap had been sprung. The choice was now stark, brutal, and public. I let the silence stretch, allowing the full weight of the situation to settle upon them. The Hayes family was staring at the documents on the table as if they were a live grenade. Their smug condescension had evaporated, replaced by a stunned, horrified comprehension. They were not here to witness a surrender. They were here to witness a transaction they had never anticipated. Finally I spoke. My voice was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was the calm, clear voice of a professor delivering the final, inescapable conclusion of her lecture. I looked first at Morgan, my daughter, whose face was a pale, frozen mask of disbelief. Morgan, I said softly, I want you to know that I was never going to let you begin your marriage in debt. The bills for your wedding were always going to be paid. My refusal was never about the money itself. It was about the principle. A principle you chose to trample on in the most public and painful way imaginable. Then I turned my gaze to her new family, to Julian Sr. and Eleanor Hayes, the powerful, judgmental audience she had been so desperate to impress. But I felt it was important, I continued, my voice gaining strength, that you, her new family, be here to witness this final transaction. You needed to understand the full context of the choice she is making today. I gestured to the documents on the table, the small check for the party and the large portfolio for a life. I am not paying for a wedding, I said, my voice ringing with a quiet, absolute finality. I am buying my freedom. This check is not a gift. It is a buyout. It is the price she has placed on our relationship. It is the severance package for a mother she has already fired. Eleanor Hayes let out a small, horrified gasp. Her eyes, which had once looked at me with such dismissive disdain, were now wide with a dawning, ugly realization about the character of the woman her son had just married. I stood up, my movements calm and deliberate. Lottie stood with me. By accepting that check, Morgan, I said, looking down at my daughter for the last time, you are making your final withdrawal. From the foundation account, from my will, and from my life. I have loved you since the moment you were born. But I will not be a party to this version of you. I will not enable a person who values a spectacle over substance, who believes love is something to be monetized. I picked up my pen from the table, signed my portion of the severance agreement with a firm, steady hand and placed the pen back down. I wish you the life you have chosen, I said. And with that I turned and walked out of the boardroom, Lottie at my side. I did not look back. I did not need to. I could feel the wreckage I had left behind me. I could imagine the furious, whispered recriminations, the dawning horror in the Hayes family as they realized they had not welcomed a rising star into their dynasty, but a manipulative, greedy fool who had just publicly sold her own mother and a substantial fortune for the price of some orchids and a country club rental. As the elevator descended, carrying me away from the life I had shed, I did not feel sadness. I felt a profound and deeply peaceful sense of liberation. I had lost a daughter, but I had reclaimed myself. My legacy would no longer be the foundation I built for her. It would be the life I now had the freedom and the considerable resources to build for myself. The account was closed, and I was, for the first time in a very long time, truly, gloriously, and completely free.